Moonlight. My memories of 30 years past are clouded by age, revisionism, and all that I now know to be true. But if memory serves me well, it was a typical July night in the Delta, and this a typical ambush patrol. On my 5-man team, we alternated each night, either accompanying one of the ambush patrols of the unit we supported, or remaining at our base and pulling 2-hour shifts of radio watch through the night. It was my turn to lie in wait, along a canal, inside a tree line, behind a paddy berm, or in tonight's case, within a Buddhist cemetery. It fronted a broad expanse of open field along one of Charlie's favorite infiltration routes, from Cambodia east to Saigon. It had been a relatively quiet week with no major operations or engagements to speak of, but the routine was important to maintain, both for our allies and for my team. We'd left base in the late evening, with just enough light to maneuver to our initial rally point, then waited for the total darkness of the Delta night to move into our final ambush position. The patrol consisted of perhaps 8 soldiers of the Regional Force Company we supported and myself. Standard operating procedures suggested 2 advisors on each mission to ensure that one might call for assistance if the other were incapacitated, but I'd long since forgone that luxury. We'd been short-handed for some weeks. First, a replacement for a new XO, I'd become commander 2 weeks after joining my team, was slow in arriving, and then I'd found it necessary to relieve my medic. Doc Garcia was such a good man, but had become a liability. On R&R in Hawaii, his wife had demanded a divorce, which had reduced him to a shell of his former self, now relieving his grief with alcohol and downs. Medics were hard to come by and were a critical element of our 5-man team. Since I was by now fluent and comfortable alone with my people, I often gave one of us a good night's sleep by pulling a solo ambush stint. Cemeteries in the Delta were much like those in New Orleans, built up with monuments and small constructions above the waterline of the Delta fields, which provided some cover, if you could get past the attendant ghosts. I'd never really believed in ghosts before Vietnam. Not really. Oh, sure, like most kids, I read the books and saw the movies and enjoyed being scared. But there were enough real-life horrors in combat to satisfy that craving. The grim realities of everyday life made the ghost stories of Boy Scout campfires rather trite and childish. Vietnamese people are an animistic people, particularly those of the villages and outlying areas. They strongly believed in spirits, those of the natural elements, of their ancestors, and those of less benign entities. Over the months among them, I began to sense the presence of others as we moved through the night. Not Charlie, for that was a very different chill or itch, but of something that belonged there in the same way that I did not. I was the interloper, and as comfortable as I became with night operations, that presence never allowed me to be fully at ease, which was probably a good thing. We had no expectation of encountering any force of size, but one never knows. As always, I had pre-planned artillery on call, as well as gunships and spooky and tac air if we needed them. We crept into our positions, set up claymores, and I checked our fields of fire. We were all seasoned hands, and I trusted each man on this patrol to do his job and remain alert until we pulled out, just after first light. We needed extra time to take up our positions because the moon was quite bright, full as I remember it, and any overt movement could be seen for some distance. I lay beside a raised tomb, did a quick comm check with my team member on radio watch, and settled back to wait. Imagine a 4-poster bed, the sides perhaps 18 inches high, the body within entombed, but above the water level of the paddy, surrounding that enclosure, which was perhaps a square of 70 feet per side. A small city of ancestors in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by acres of rice paddy. There was thicker brush and nipple palm a click away to the west, and the canal to our north. I remember at some point rolling over on one elbow and gazing up at the bright moon overhead. Miles from any ambient light, Delta nights were remarkable in their clarity of night sky. I'd never before or since seen the heavens so clearly defined, constellations as they were drawn in star charts, undiminished by smog or cloud or ground light. It seemed to me remarkable that, at that very instant, there were 2 meaningful and contradictory realities afoot. Fulfilling the promise of JFK made years before, 3 Americans had journeyed all that way safely, and 2 were about to set foot on the luminous orb floating high above me. Yet I was engaged in something so ancient and elemental and somehow antithetical to the progress their achievement implied, for I was lying in wait to kill another human being. My experiences in Vietnam were rife with the contradictions and dualities of combat, but never so clearly as now. I thought, this is the alpha and omega of human existence. Our science allowed us to visit the moon, walk upon it, and safely return, and yet some things had progressed not at all, for one man taking the life of another had existed before men walked upright. We encountered no one on that moonlit night, probably a night too bright to encourage any infiltration, and while I took great pride in our unit's willingness and capacity to punish Charlie for his incursions, I was not disappointed with our lack of success that particular night. Somehow it seemed right. That was written on the 22nd of July, 1999. This was written on the 20th of July, 2001. This evening, I attended a gallery party in Santa Monica. Throughout the day, I had sensed a memory wandering the periphery of my mind. The day seemed somehow significant, but just why I couldn't say. The gallery owner then introduced me to another guest. Tucker, I'd like you to meet Buzz Aldrin. And suddenly, the synchronicity snapped into focus. I shared with him my memories from that time, and he was graciously attentive.